Today I'm talking to Dr. Jeffrey Bale, who is a retired professor emeritus from the Monterey Institute and an expert on political violence and extremist groups. Jeff, thanks so much for joining. I wanted to get your reaction and opinion of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I personally have never had a reaction, an aggrieved reaction to a public figure that I've never met personally before. But I think a lot of people have been deeply affected by this event. So I wanted to get your reaction to it.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, certainly a lot of people have been deeply affected. Um, I mean, I think it's rather shocking. What makes it shocking is the fact that not that people, not that extremists think it's okay to kill their designated enemies. That's a typical attitude that extremists have. But the thing about Kirk is he's basically more or less a mainstream social and religious conservative, although he moved in a populist direction, I guess you could say, in a more populist direction in recent years. But I mean, he's not an extremist. Charlie Kirk is not an extremist, and he doesn't espouse extreme views. He basically is, like kind of an establishment social conservative and religious conservative. And also the thing which made him unique. I think the thing that really affected people most is the fact that he was the person who was promoting civic dialogue. He was going on to college campuses, and he was willing to engage. He was willing to engage in debates with people who didn't agree with him, and he wasn't. When he was involved in those debates, he wasn't insulting people and yelling at them and acting like a jackass. I mean, he was yelled at a lot, but he was basically a person who was trying to uh, engage in civil debate and persuade people of his ideas. And the fact that the people who dislike his ideas thought that he was such an evil person that he deserved to be assassinated is just really kind of astonishing. And I think it kind of it really lifts the mask off of the left. The left likes to portray itself as being compassionate and tolerant and humanitarian and against hate and all this kind of nonsense. When in actuality, I mean, as those of us who are familiar with extremism of all kinds, including left-wing extremism, know, uh, left-wing extremists are hate-filled, bigoted people like other kinds of extremists. So to me, the fact that the radical leftists were cheering this on and were organizing and possibly involved in organizing or instigating it doesn't surprise me. To me, the thing which was the most shocking is the fact that all of these uh, normal sort of, I guess you could say, um, people who self-identify as progressives, quote unquote, um, just regular people. Most of them, a lot of them, privileged people, uh, people who are not radical, people who aren't like revolutionaries, people who aren't violent themselves, people who aren't going to go out and attack anybody. But the fact that so many of these people, it wasn't just the fringe elements, the radical left, who were celebrating this and cheering it on, but there's this broad swath of people on the progressive left, quote unquote, that made these videos and just displayed their moral turpitude and moral depravity. Really, I mean, I don't see, and then we see some surveys that have been done in recent weeks where something like over 50% of Democrats think under certain circumstances politically assassinating their enemies in a democracy is acceptable. And I think only something like 17% of Republicans thought that. So I think that gives you a pretty grim idea of how unhinged and deranged most of the left side of the political spectrum really
Yeah.
has become. I mean, I'm an old-fashioned liberal, and many people I know are old-fashioned liberals, and we are just absolutely appalled at the kind of celebration of of a political assassination in a democracy by all these people who proclaim to be so tolerant and and humanitarian and concerned and so forth and so on. It's a really it shows really how far this country has descended into partisan divisions, and where so many people on the left side of the spectrum are absolutely unwilling to even have discussions or debates with people that they disagree with, because they immediately categorize them, as extremists do. They categorize the people they disagree with as as um, as evil people, as people who are somehow so intrinsically evil that whatever fate befalls them, it's perfectly okay.
Hmm. I was thinking about the Charlie Hebdo massacre in
Yes,
Paris. That was in 2015. And I was
right.
thinking about the response to that event
Hmm.
when, albeit people vapidly posted on social media, Je suis Charlie,
Hmm.
internationally. There was
Right.
like an international outpouring. Similarly, so with this event. But I wanted to ask you how we've gotten from that reaction, where it seemed to be universally condemned that anyone should be the victim of political violence. And in 10 years in America, we are so far away from a universal agreement on that. How did this come about?
Well, I actually think this has been going on for quite a long time. You may remember, I mean, I certainly do, after 9/11, there were a lot of leftist, quote unquote, intellectuals who were basically arguing that we deserved it, that this was a legitimate response to imperialism, quote unquote, to American imperialism, and so forth and so on. And there was like these lunatics, like that professor at University of Colorado Boulder, the phony Indian guy, um, who basically called the people who died in the World Trade Center towers little Eichmanns, and so forth and so on. And even after and after every jihadist attack in Europe, there's all these people on the left will as well as Muslim apologists, of course, will uh, will try to rationalize it, and the media oftentimes adopts the line in the immediate aftermath of a jihadist attack. The mainstream media will oftentimes adopt the line, well, yes, it's a bad thing, but what we really have to be most concerned about is the backlash against Muslims, Islamophobia.
Right,
In other words,
Islamophobia.
they try to totally twist the narrative so that the perpetrators become the victims.
Well,
And
now it's mainstream. I guess it's just become more mainstream. Like you have there was that ABC News correspondent who was talking about how touching the
oh
interaction
yeah,
was
yeah,
between
yeah,
the two
yeah,
people um,
yeah.
who were involved in
I got
this.
my violin out when I read that.
Yeah, um, yeah. Now it seems super mainstream to hold that
Well,
view.
I think the media has played an absolutely toxic role in Western countries for really for the last 2 decades. The this smearing of everybody as fascist and far right. I mean, basically, the establishment, the progressive globalist establishment and radical left, have been demonizing everybody who opposes their policies and opposes their views. They've been demonizing these people as far right, as extremists, as fascists, as Nazis, as dictators. They were talking about Trump and various other leaders. I mean, this is the rhetoric. They're using this absolutely emotion laden, hysterical, unhinged rhetoric to demonize their political opponents. That's become normalized in the mainstream media. And when you're talking about all these progressives, quote unquote, and when I say progressive, always in quotation marks, because in fact, most of the policies pushed by progressives are fundamentally regressive, in my opinion. But the fact is that most of these progressives, they're these like sheep, and I do think of them as sheep now. Sheep who read the Washington Post, who read the New York Times, who read the Economist, who read the Guardian. Um, I mean, these are people who believe everything that the mainstream media tells them, even though the mainstream media is nothing more than has become nothing more than a propagandistic, partisan entity, which spreads nonstop it spreads nonstop propaganda, or nonstop partisan propaganda, and it lies all the time, and it covers up the violence and the horrible attitudes on the left. It apologizes for street criminals. It apologizes for illegal migrants who commit crimes. I mean, basically, the whole progressive attitude now is somehow defending the people who are the least deserving of any kind of sympathy. Predatory
Hmm.
criminals, illegals who behave badly, um, you know, bums and homeless people, mentally ill homeless people on the street who are endangering themselves and other people. And these are like and the the whole trans thing, which is just utterly absurd. Um, they're basically trying to normalize deviance and normalize mental illness, normalize criminality, and actually punish people who are law abiding. They're actually prioritizing the interests of non citizens and criminals and mentally ill people over normal, uh, productive citizens. I mean, that's been going on that's the rhetoric of the left now for decades. And it's
And
just gotten worse. It's gotten more unhinged as time has gone on. And so they've created this toxic intellectual and moral climate in this country, where somehow anybody who opposes their beliefs about anything or their policies which are demonstrably failed on every level, anybody who opposes those policies or criticizes those policies is immediately smeared as some kind of like extremist, a far right extremist, a conspiracy theorist. If you challenge the authoritarian COVID narrative, you're a conspiracy theorist. So this is basically it's nothing more than witch hunting. The media and the establishment has created a witch hunting climate in this country, and it's obviously affected the attitudes of lots of otherwise people who on other issues would be considered normal and relatively sane. But
mhm.
they're just constantly imbibing this dishonest propaganda, unhinged, alarmist propaganda, and they're hysterical. I mean, you try talking to a progressive, to one of to people, somebody who's got Trump derangement syndrome. You cannot.
You
It's like
can't.
it's like talking to like a Christian fundamentalist. It's like trying to convince a Christian fundamentalist that Jesus isn't the Son of God, or trying to convince a Muslim that Muhammad wasn't the messenger of Allah. You just can't make headway with these people. They're just fanatics,
Yeah.
and they get and instead of actually debating and trying to be rational, they just get all emotionally overwrought and start screaming and getting and carried away. I mean, like a 12-year-old. Like there's a whole section of this progressive and radical left in Western countries now that literally behaves like a petulant 12-year-old, stomping their feet and ranting and raving and being emotionally overwrought. And now worse, thinking that they have not only thinking that they have a right to kill other people.
Yeah. Well, now they're dangerous 12-year-olds,
Yes, now they're dangerous.
because
Now they're
they've
12-year-olds with a loaded pistol.
yeah, they've sufficiently dehumanized anyone who disagrees with them enough to
Absolutely.
justify their murder. And I've felt that personally. There've been a couple of incidents here in LA where I live, where I've had interactions with people, polite attempts at interactions, where it's occurred to me, I'm like, oh, these people wouldn't care if I were dead.
Absolutely
Like
not.
if someone came and took me away, they would be happy about that
Yeah,
based on my very rational, in my view, middle of the road political
exactly.
views.
Well, that's the point. Even if you're a
Um,
classical liberal now, like I'm a classical liberal. I believe in maximum personal freedom, personal responsibility. I believe in anti-authoritarian. I'm anti-conformist. I believe in maximal free speech. I mean, those are classic liberal positions. Liberalism is on the left. Uh,
yeah.
you know, in fact, the most radical idea in the history of political thought is the idea that individuals have certain intrinsic rights that can't be abridged. That's literally the most radical idea, the revolutionary idea in the history of political thought. And
How,
so, for people now to claim that people who are liberal defenders of free speech even are basically on the far right. I mean that's the mental attitude that these people have. I mean they're
yeah.
they're so
How,
ignorant and unhinged. There are two things. historically ignorant. I mean, they literally don't know anything about the history of political thought or the history of political movements or history in general, and they're emotionally overwrought. It's just. I mean, I don't even go on social media sites. When I'm on social media sites now, like on Facebook, I only go on my own page, and mostly there I just post rock and roll related stuff. I don't post hardly any political stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't even want to look at the the Facebook feeds of a lot of my friends. People
Yeah.
I've known, countercultural people who I've known my whole life, who are smart people and cool people, but who are now so unhinged. All they do is just post like propagandistic garbage on their feeds. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
How
just
could
unbelievable.
someone another question about leftism in general.
Mhm.
How does someone who is like of a certain level of maturity, age or not, level of intelligence and an informed person, how can they still be a leftist? Because to me, it's a denial of the reality of human nature
I think
to
that's
a
true.
degree.
I think
Like
I
I can't believe that there are adults that hold
correct.
these views that have seen and been around and experienced humanity for
Yeah.
a fair amount of time that you could still be a leftist.
Well, it'd certainly be the kind of deranged leftist. In other words, the kind. I mean, the problem. One of the key beliefs of the left is that people are inherently good. People are intrinsically good,
Yes.
and that it's corrupt social institutions that make them bad. And if we could just create, if we could eliminate all the flaws in societal institutions, then the natural goodness of people would emerge. I mean, that is like the view of a 12-year-old who literally doesn't know anything about reality and knows
Yeah.
nothing about human nature. Knows nothing about human
Um,
nature.
Jeff, I want to ask you about Antifa and Trantifa, specifically, and how this fits into like how we got to this uh, political violence, this last iteration of American political violence, which seems to be recently driven by at least these. There was the mass shooting at the school in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
which seems to be driven by radical trans and Antifa.
Yes, that's right. But I think to understand this, I mean, you have to understand something about how the anti-fascist movement has evolved, right? I should say devolved. Well, I would say it
Yeah, could you
actually it
explain
didn't.
that?
Yeah, it actually didn't devolve because it started out bad in the sense that anti-fascist groups that call themselves anti-fascist were almost all invariably at the very from the outset and throughout the 20s and 30s and into the 40s. Most groups that characterized themselves as anti-fascist were in fact communist front organizations. They were organizations established by the Soviet Union or by communist parties in various countries. So they adopted the mantle of anti-fascism to try to make themselves more appealing and more popular. And of course, they were legitimately opposed to fascism. But the point is that calling yourself an anti-fascist has a positive connotation. So when you've got sectarian like Leninists and Trotskyists and Maoists calling themselves anti-fascists, I mean, basically what they're doing is disguising their own underlying extremist ideology and pretending that they're just noble fighters against fascism and so forth and so on. So all the original anti-fascist networks, well, maybe not all of them, but I would say 95% of them in the 20s and 30s were established by communist parties, most of which were linked to the Soviet Union. So the original first wave of anti-fascist groups were basically communist front organizations. Then in the 80s, there was a whole new wave of anti-fascist, and those were associated with like the anarcho-punk movement and the squatters movements and so forth and so on. And that arose to some extent because of the problem posed by Nazi skinheads. And so you had like punks and squatters who were attacked by Nazi skinheads. Um, and then you even had like groups of skinheads who were anti-fa. Like you had two different groups of skinheads. The skinheads against racial prejudice, which were anti-racist skinheads, and then you had actually left-wing communist and anarchist skinheads known as red and anarchist skinheads. And those people mobilized, joined together with the punks to fight on the street in some cases with Nazi with neo-Nazi skinheads and so forth and so on. I think the first of the skinhead groups that really mobilized against the Nazi skinheads was a group in Minnesota called the Baldies. But anyway, so the second wave of anti-fascism was just, in some extent, a response to a real threat on the street and at gigs. I mean, I remember, like, in the early '80s, even in San Francisco, there were a group of Nazi skins who started coming to punk shows and starting fights and brawls and causing trouble all the time. And it was creating like a really tense scene. It was making it very not enjoyable to go to gigs at all, because there's this tension in the air. You could be physically attacked. Mm-hmm. So there were legitimate reasons for the rise, I guess you could say, of a new anti-fascist movement, like in the '80s, and which entered into the '90s. But then, of course, it got warped because a lot of the anti-fascists are extremists themselves. I mean, a lot of them are still. I mean, even today. I mean, even before the latest wave, which I'm going to talk about momentarily, even during the second phase, a lot of the people who called themselves anti-fascists were members of the communist parties, or like the Revolutionary Communist Party, the Maoist Revolutionary Communist Party, or like the Anti-Nazi League in Britain was basically a front group created by the Socialist Workers' Party. So in addition to the anarcho-punks, you had some sectarian communists who were also in this anti-fascist movement in the late '70s, '80s, and into the '90s. But then, I mean, now I'd say we have a totally different group of people. There's like been a third sort of wave of anti-fascism that's arisen, I would say, in the 2000s, and some of it's just like a holdover from the anarcho-punk stuff, because a lot of the anarcho-punks adopted the stupidest forms of anarchism, like anarcho-communism. They're literally the dumbest form of anarchism. I mean, I'm a person has anarchist sympathies, because I hate authority. And what did I just do?
Just lost your camera for a second.
Okay, there. I hate authority, and so I had I've always been anti-authoritarian, and I don't want anybody telling me what to do, whether it's the state or whether it's just mainstream normies or anything like that. So I have a kind of sympathy for the idea of a kind of decentralized political structure that's non-authoritarian and everything like that. But a lot of the people who are anarchists have totally delusional utopian views. And not only do they have delusional utopian views, but they actually are very intolerant and fanatical against people that they consider evil. So in other words, anarchism is another form of extremism, even though it claims to promote a kind of anti-authoritarianism. The fact of the matter is that anarchists can be as intolerant and as violent as history has demonstrated as any other kind of extremists, including communists or fascists or Islamists or whoever. So we're dealing with extremists when we're generally speaking, when we're dealing with anarchists. I mean, some of them are more pacifistic, but there's a significant number that think that violence against fascists and other people they designate as enemies is perfectly appropriate, and that's why you see these mobs of anti-fascists attacking innocent people on the streets, people who just express opinions they don't agree with, who they smear as fascists. Anyway, but now there's been this third development. Now you have like street people and mentally ill people who are part of this anti-fascist movement. I mean, just the kind of the dregs of society, frankly. Street people.
Is that mostly in Portland? It's nationwide, but
I would say nationwide. I mean, you still got this cadre. You still got the holdovers from the anarcho-punk movement who haven't grown up. You still have sectarian communists trying to instrumentalize and manipulate the anti-fascist movement. But now you've got, in terms of the shock troops or the, on the street, now you've really got like street people, homeless people, drug addicts, mentally ill people, the Antifa, those kind of characters. Those were people that Marx would have characterized as the as the lumpen proletariat. People who are sort of outside the class system, kind of the dregs of society, who could be mobilized for any kind of action. And that's why you see these people on the street, no matter any pretext will do, and they'll be out on the street, not only protesting, but violently protesting and being disruptive. Any cause will do. The Palestinian cause, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the cause du jour is, you're going to see all these people out in the street with their black masks and their black uniforms, looking for a pretext to attack people and cause trouble. That's just the reality that we're dealing with now. And so I think we're really in the most debased phase of the anti-fascist movement. I mean, even though the original Communist Front group was a pretty bad group too, but now we're really at the stage where we're really talking about a lot of people who are actually, I would consider, genuine sociopaths or psychopaths, who are loosely affiliated with this anti-fascist milieu now. And not only in Portland, but pretty much everywhere. You see the way they behave on the streets.
And is it organized?
Loosely organized. I mean, here we have to talk about the organizational difference. When you're talking about communist groups, they generally are organized into a kind of hierarchical authoritarian vanguard party structure, like a Leninist kind of structure. Anarchists, because of the anti-authoritarian ideology that they have, they tend not to have those kinds of vanguard party structures. They tend to organize themselves into what we call affinity groups, loose groups without clear hierarchical structures and so forth and so on, and without a chain of command and so forth and so on. And then, of course, they're networked. They're not only networked. The anarchists, the anti-fascists, are networked not only across the United States, but also they have networks from linking the anti-fascists in America to the anti-fascists in Europe and various other countries. So it's a kind of loose global network of people. And then the individual anti-fascist groups, supposedly don't have hierarchies. But in actuality, they do have hierarchies because, as the elite theorists said in the late 19th century, they were the people who were the most right. It wasn't Marx who was right. It was the elite theorists, mostly these Italian people, Pareto and Mosca. And so anyway, these people argued in every human social organization, there's going to be a hierarchical structure. Even if, and in fact, Pareto argued that he did a study of the German Social Democratic Party, which was, of course, claimed to be anti-authoritarian, and showed that it was one of the most hierarchical, tightly organized parties there was. And so the argument of the elite theorists is in any human social organization, there's going to be natural, if there's not unnatural hierarchies forming, in other words, descriptive kind of positions, there's going to be natural hierarchies forming. Whenever you sit in a group of 10 people, certain people are going to become the dominant people in terms of if they're having a conversation. Some people are more knowledgeable. Some people are smarter. Some people are more aggressive. Some people are more macho. And so certain people have charismatic personalities. They tend to dominate, and other people are meeker and shyer and so forth and so on. So there's always going to be, even in the most anti-hierarchical, even in the most theoretically anti-hierarchical social movement, or there's going to be natural hierarchies formed. So even within these anarchist groups that are organized that have this affinity group structure, there's still certain people who are the dominant figures in those people, and some of them are intellectuals, and some of them are the ones that are the most prone to violence and so forth and so on.
And how does the Trantifa and the trans movement fit in with Antifa?
Well, there's an overlap there, and of course Andy Ngo is the person who's done the most. He's one of the people who's done the most research about the current Antifa movement, and obviously been targeted by them many times himself. They call him a Nazi, of course. They call everybody a fascist or a Nazi that they don't like, especially if they expose their activities. But what we're really talking about here, when we're talking about let's talk about the whole trans thing to try to parse it out, parse it out a little bit, because people tend to confuse different categories when we're talking about trans. So let's start out. First of all, there's transvestites. All right, transvestites are just men who like to dress in women's clothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've known many of those people throughout my whole life, because some of them hang out in the underground rock and roll scene, and so I've known quite a few of those people. They tend to be fun people. But transvestites don't actually believe that they're women.
Mm-hmm.
They actually know that they're
yeah.
And drag queens are kind of like the epitome of the transvestites. They like to get up and be campy and do all this, but they didn't used to. I mean, nowadays maybe things have changed, but generally those people never really believed that they were really men. I mean, really women. Even though they dressed like women. And then you have like people with sexual fetishes. These people who like to put on women's clothing at home and jerk off, and it's a sexual thrill, a sexual fetish, and they get it. And generally those people are harmless as long as they're just engaging in self-pleasuring, or if they're engaged in consensual sex with other adults. Who cares, right? Now,
Yeah.
if they start targeting children, then we're talking about pedophiles, and no amount of euphemism like minor attracted person is going to disguise what these
Right.
people really are, right? And then, but now you really have people who are mentally ill. I mean, I would say the transsexuals, as opposed to transvestites and people who have sexual fetishes, transsexuals are people who actually believe that they're women, men who actually believe that they're women, and people who are so determined to be women that some of them will have radical surgery. They'll cut off their penises, and they'll take hormones and so forth and so on. And I mean, so I can't see how anyone cannot recognize that a man who honestly believes that they're a woman and is willing to mutilate their own body. Can anybody honestly say that those people do not have serious psychological problems? I don't think so. In the same way that there's some people that have fetishes about amputation, right? Like amputees turn them on and stuff. And some people, they want to they want to lose limbs themselves. So some people who have
What
this,
are those people called?
there is a term for it. I can't remember now. There is a special psychological term for it, but some of them actually cut off their own limbs, right? So they
Oh,
can actually
God.
become amputees. And I think that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about men who honestly believe that they're women, to the point where they can't accept that anybody else won't accept the fact that they're women, and they get violent if somebody doesn't use the ridiculous pronouns that they've invented, or somebody doesn't affirm their supposed gender. These are people
Mhm.
who have serious psychological problems.
And have the
So
aggression, like either aggression from hormone therapy or latent aggression as men,
yes, as men, they have testosterone.
and no
Yes,
outlet
exactly.
because they're supposed to present in society as women.
Correct. That's right. So a
Uh,
lot of these people are aggressive, violent, mentally disturbed people,
mhm.
and you can see it in Portland and other cities. I mean, almost every month there's some violent trans person attacks somebody in downtown Portland or in Seattle or somewhere. I mean, it's just like a very common occurrence. You know, Oftentimes without any kind of provocation of any sort. So you just have to ask yourself. I mean, um, I don't know why so many people in this country have tried to normalize this transsexual thing. I mean, all the institutions, medical associations, the media, academia, the Biden administration, and the Democrats, they're trying to normalize. Just
Normalize it for minors,
yeah,
not
normalize it
even
even for,
people who
yeah.
are 18 plus, like if for
Yes, that's right.
kids.
Like somehow it's okay for a 12-year-old and you think you're a woman, you can get on hormones. I mean, it's just outrageous, man. It's like
Yeah,
that's child abuse on a scale that's unimaginable. I mean, the people who do surgery on minors are like the Mengeles, the Dr. Mengeles of our era.
I agree.
However,
Um,
they try to rationalize their
it's
barbaric.
almost like it's a status symbol among some progressives to have a
Oh, yeah,
trans child.
absolutely.
It's
Well,
a,
like you
it's
see
a,
some of these dim-witted progressive celebrities who
yeah,
all their kids are trans, quote unquote.
um,
That's Munchausen by proxy.
yeah,
Munchausen syndrome, Munchausen by proxy
yep.
syndrome. That's what that is. And it's also this disgusting form of virtue signaling where you're actually harming your own children so that you can pose as being virtuous because you're so
Yes, that
tolerant.
you're so evolved that you're
Yeah, you're so evolved.
rejecting
You're
human
so
biology.
evolved. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And the
Jeff,
idea that, yeah, go ahead.
I
Sorry.
wanted to ask you while we're on the subject. I remember, so you mentioned the second wave of anti-fascist groups as a counterweight to real skinhead groups. Um, sort of against each other. And I remember watching videos, I think it was mostly in Portland like 10 years ago, and it would be Antifa fighting these kind of like these other groups. I wouldn't even call them right wing, but maybe nationalistic or whatever. And it
Like the
was
Proud
usually
Boys, for
like the
example.
Proud Boys. I think it was pre-Proud Boys. And it was
Yeah,
usually them beating up Antifa because these are like,
because they're actually tough guys.
actually like tough guys.
Yeah, well, the Proud Boys,
But those guys got, am I correct in saying that there's no counterweight now because a bunch of those guys got arrested
correct.
under the Democrat administration and got
Right,
outsized federal charges.
correct. That's
So
right.
now there's essentially
Meanwhile,
no counterweight to Antifa that is outside of law. And
in
in
terms of like,
liberal,
yes, in terms of people who are willing to, civilians who are willing to fight them on the streets, uh,
yeah. So
or,
is
or
that
are
a
willing to,
correct?
or are willing to defend other people that they're attacking on the streets. Because that's how the whole thing about the Proud Boys started as a personal bodyguard, for
It
um,
was my understanding is that the Proud Boys it was Gavin
yeah,
McGinnis
Gavin
who
McInnes.
started them like kind of as a
It's a
joke.
joke. It was like a joke. And by the way, the Proud Boys are not a white nationalist group or a white
Thank you
supremacist
for
group
saying that. I've
or a
been saying
fascist
that
group.
for
Yeah,
years. The leader of the Proud Boys is a black Cuban guy called Enrique Tarrio.
yeah. I mean,
And this,
sometimes you actually have people like that who are Nazis, but in this case, we're not talking about that. The Proud Boys are a civic nationalist group. They're not a white. They're not an ethnic nationalist group, which is why they were referred to by white nationalists. The Proud Boys were referred to by white nationalists as the alt-right because they were civic. They were attacked constantly by the real white nationalists for not being racial nationalists. So, and yet the
yeah,
left tries to portray them as like white supremacists and neo Nazis. It's all lies. Uh, and I mean, there have been some actual white nationalists who probably infiltrated various chapters of the Proud Boys and so forth and so on. But the original the Proud Boys were defending people who were being attacked by the Antifas, like in Berkeley, right in I think 2017, right after Trump was elected. There was those big brawls between people, and
I think when
basically,
Milo
yeah, Milo
Yiannopoulos
was going
went
to
to
speak
speak,
there, and then
yeah,
Ann Coulter was going to speak there, and the Antifas were mobilizing, like trying to shut down like somebody like Ann Coulter from speaking. I mean, it's just like, what are you nuts? I mean, like Ann Coulter, some kind of dangerous fascist or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
And so then you had like the Proud Boys and some other people, and there were some actual right wing groups like Rise Above and who went to Berkeley too, uh, to face off against the Antifas, and so you had some brawling going on. But all this stuff, none of this stuff should have ever happened. There's a simple solution to prevent political street violence, and in America, we should not tolerate political street violence at all. And the simple solution is you just have the police cordoning off the different rival groups. That's how you prevent brawling on the street between the radical left and the radical right, or even not even the radical right, but the people that the radical left want to attack who are not radical right. You just have a police cordon between them, and don't allow them to. And anybody who tries to cross the cordon or break through the cordon, you arrest them. That's
but
simple.
what do you
Same thing
do
in Charlotte.
now?
Same thing in Charlottesville, by the way. All the fighting there only happened because the police didn't form a cordon. There would have been no
Yeah, in the
violence.
UK, they're better at that in the UK from the football stuff. But
Yeah.
how do you deal with now? Like I think it was 100 days of consecutive violence against federal officers in Portland
Well, look, it's
the
very
first
sad.
time around, and now
It's very, yeah.
you have now we have assassinations and
Yes.
doxing and people who are conservative influencers and voices and journalists
Yes.
have to travel with security teams
Correct.
because
Yeah.
we are awash with left-wing lunatics in this
Yes.
country.
We
So how
are.
does this like I feel like the FBI has been weaponized against mostly law-abiding Americans
Correct.
for the last 10 years or so.
That's right.
There's no counterbalance on a street level against these groups. And now you can literally assault a federal officer. I saw it in Los Angeles here a few months ago. you can assault a federal officer with impunity.
Mm.
So there are no consequences for violence. So how can this new version of actual assassinations of people in America, like what is the historic solution to this? What's
Well,
worked in
there's actually a simple solution. One of the biggest problem, here's what the real message here with respect to the Antifa and these violent groups and BLM and all these the black racial nationalists and so forth. These groups have all gotten funding from progressive foundations. And so here's the funny thing about these people. They like to think of themselves as revolutionaries. The anti-fascists think of themselves as the grand revolutionaries. They're trying to overthrow the system, man. We're the, blah, blah, blah. These are people who are useful idiots. The Antifas are useful idiots because they're being funded by foundations like the Tides Foundation and other Soros linked front groups or linked groups, like foundations. So they're receiving funding from billionaires. They're protected by the mainstream media, who always apologize for their violence. The Democrat Party and political officials don't want to deal with the problem. Soros-backed prosecutors won't prosecute them and jail them. And so we really have a two-tiered justice system in this country, just like in Britain, where people on the left are able to almost get away with murder. That's the one thing they can't get away with yet. They can't get away with murder, but they can get away with pretty much anything else. And we saw that because, in several cases when violent leftists were rioting, including the Antifas were rioting in New York and some other cities, like in 2020 and 2019 and so forth and so on. Then they were later arrested. Then these left-wing activist attorneys sued the cities and sued the police, and some of these people actually got settlements. The police had to take action to prevent them from engaging in violent disruptions, and then they got a payout. They actually got a payout. The people who were causing the trouble got a payout. I mean, meanwhile, on the right, if you were if you were a person who engaged in no violence at all on January 6th, I mean, there's 20 of the 2,500 people that the FBI arrested on January 6th, like 250 of them actually committed some kind of act of violence or vandalism. The rest of those people committed no violence of any kind.
And they got federal prison.
Yeah, they had the book thrown at them. Meanwhile, the people who've been running amok in the streets in various American cities for decades now have gotten slaps on the wrist. I mean, so that's the thing. We have two-tier justice here, where the justice system protects one group of violent extremists and cracks down on other groups that they consider extremists, whether they are or not. And then you have, of course, in these places like Berkeley and Portland and Seattle and Los Angeles and DC and various other places, that are in New York, that are run by leftist politicians. They don't do anything to curb the activities of these people unless they firebomb a police car or something. They don't do anything to curb their activities, and they don't prosecute them, and they don't jail them. They get slapped on the wrist. The whole thing about no bail and everything. People get arrested and they're out.
Yeah.
All this catch and release bullshit. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
So what's the solution to this from a what should the Trump administration do?
I actually think that they should that these anytime these groups they're a national network. The Antifa network is a national network. It's actually a transnational network. It's not just a local state issue. It's not just something confined to a municipality. So I think this whole network should be under investigation. I know there's the people have been talking about designating the Antifas as a terrorist organization, and certainly that's what their violence is. They are a terrorist organization in the sense that they're carrying out active violence, not just to harm their enemies, but to send a message to a wider audience to intimidate everybody else. Don't say anything we don't like, otherwise you could be attacked next. I mean, this is a classic terrorism. The things that they're doing, when you're attacking moderately conservative people who've been invited to speak, and running riot and violently attacking people who want to attend those events, you're not just trying to shut down that event. You're trying to send a message tell anybody else who expresses ideas that you don't agree with that we're going to go after you. We're not going to let you speak. We're going to no platform you. You don't have a right to express opinions we don't agree with. I mean, that's really what it's all about. So it is a
Yeah.
terrorist. Their violence is basically terrorist violence. There's no doubt about it. It doesn't, you don't have to actually kill somebody for something to be terrorist violence. I mean, street violence, which is designed to suppress, to prevent anybody else from expressing opinions, is terrorism. I mean, it is.
So what should the Trump administration do? They could declare Antifa a domestic terror organization.
Well, there's a
What
couple
about
things.
the funding? What about dealing with
Yeah,
funding
to me,
and
that's the number one
investigations?
priority. The number one priority is where are these people getting their money? Because there's this roving group of people who travel from city to city and then engage in violent disruptions. There's a whole group of these traveling Antifa. Now, some of these people are just itinerant people. They don't have normal jobs, so they actually have the time in their hands to do it. But somebody's got to be subsidizing them. Who's paying for them to travel around the country in buses and so forth and so on? Who's providing weapons in strategic places before they have some kind of protest or some kind of thing? Who's doing those things? Those people really need to be prosecuted and jailed, in my opinion. And
So those are the Soroses. Like there
yeah,
was been
the people who are tangibly facilitating left-wing violence need to be prosecuted, and the
and then
people who
on
carry,
a
and
and
the
then
people
the
who carry it out need to be prosecuted as well. I mean, and I get it. I'm not just identifying the left. Anybody who carries out acts of political violence, any civilians who carry out acts of
and
political violence should be the state should crack down on them and eliminate them. Either
well, something that I wonder is that in the last kind of even 30 years, like you look at Ruby Ridge, the Gretchen Whitmer
Mhm.
kidnapping fiasco, which was
Right.
really like an FBI entrapment
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
operation.
Yes.
You had a bunch of like guys who would not have dreamed of doing something like that. So there
Yeah, but
seems to be
you're right.
an
I mean, but I have to say that they're not guiltless though. It's
not
true that
guiltless,
it's
but
true that
there's
these, yes, it's true that the FBI orchestrated a sting operation to to bust these people. And if it hadn't been for the FBI instigating these plots, they would never have happened.
sure.
100%,
So
100%
my
true.
point is that the emphasis has been so heavy, and we've been told for years about white nationalist extremism and all
Exactly.
of this bullshit.
It is bullshit.
Even teachers at PTA meetings,
Yes.
like in an FBI dossier,
Hmm.
and it doesn't seem to be the case. I can't recall one incident where the FBI has infiltrated an Antifa group and they've broken up a plot
I you know
or an arrest or
I have to
there
agree
seems
with
to be
you.
no focus whatsoever on left-wing domestic terror groups.
Yes, I think that's generally correct.
And my fear is that now, the Trump administration has come in, Kash Patel has a hold of the FBI, but this isn't something you don't just like flip a switch
Yeah, the
and
problem
have
is that
networks like this. This takes like years to cultivate. Um, I'm guessing it takes years to cultivate this kind of infrastructure and penetrate groups and have a network.
yes,
Um,
that's true. I mean, and part of the problem, of course, is that the institutions of the U.S. government are themselves so ideologically compromised now. I mean, there like so many people who work in the U.S. government, including in the law enforcement agencies and in the intelligence community, are now progressives, are basically progressives, quote unquote, and they are sympathetic to a lot of these groups and to the causes of a lot of these groups. They're sympathetic to Black Lives Matter, which is just basically a black racist or black
yeah,
racial
like a
national.
Marxist racial
Well, yeah,
group.
but the Marxism is like a veneer, in my opinion. They're basically a black racist group. They're
Yeah,
basically an anti-white racist group that uses like Marxist agitation and propaganda techniques. You know, that's what they are. But the point of it is, and by the way, they've been responsible for the deaths of more black people than all the cops and white supremacists, quote unquote, in the past 20 years. they alone have been responsible because they've the police cut back on proactive policing in response to all this anti-police rhetoric and so forth and so on. That made it easier for violent predators in the black community to kill more innocent black people. So they have a lot of black blood on their hands. Black Lives Matter, But the problem is we have so many people in federal agencies. Obviously we have that corrupt cabal at the top of the FBI. Comey and all those people who were running anti-constitutional covert operations against Trump. But there's people I think on lower levels, on the rank and file, who also are totally partisan. They're Democrat partisans. They have a progressive worldview. They think that the radical left is basically on the right side of history, even if they sometimes they go too far. But and so there really hasn't been any effort to seriously monitor, infiltrate, and disrupt and destroy these kinds of networks on the left. I mean, they've certainly done that on the right. All along, they've infiltrated radical right-wing groups. They infiltrated factions. I mean, going back to the 60s, they infiltrated radical Klan factions. They infiltrated the Minutemen. They've infiltrated like little tiny neo-Nazi sects. So all along, the federal government has been fairly aggressively infiltrating and destroying radical right groups, and I don't have a problem with that. I mean, to the extent that these groups are violent, that's the job of the law enforcement and security agencies. I mean, it'd be different if we lived in an authoritarian or totalitarian society where the government was the enemy. Then you could understand armed resistance. You could understand citizens rising up against the government. But when you live in a democracy, however corrupt that our democracy has become, when you live in a democratic country, you cannot just justify violent extremist groups threatening law-abiding citizens. You can't tolerate that.
Yeah.
No matter where they come from, whether they come from the right, whether they come from the left, whether they're secular, whether they're religious. If you're a violent extremist, or whether they're eco-radicals, if you're a violent extremist who's threatening law-abiding citizens, then it's the job of the government to do something about it. I mean, look, the only legitimate, if a government can't even protect its own citizens, I mean, that's the number one function of any legitimate government, is protecting its own law-abiding citizens and protecting its country from foreign invasion. And if you're not protecting your own country from foreign invasion by letting millions of unvetted migrants in, for example, they're not really an invasion like a military invasion, and if you're not protecting law-abiding citizens from violent predatory criminals, much less from political extremists, then you have to question the legitimacy of a government that's not even performing the most basic functions for which it's elected. And that's really where we're at now. So I think what we really need to do, there's several things that need to be done. Number one is we need to identify the funders of these violent groups and prosecute them. Number two, there needs to be extensive monitoring of Antifa and radical leftists social media sites, just like there should be for right-wing sites and for Islamist websites and everything else, jihadist sites. That's the purpose of law enforcement agencies, is to monitor violent extremist milieus. And so all of this vast array of groups that are on social media, websites, posting inflammatory material, oftentimes directly inciting violence, sometimes directly organizing, plotting, and planning campaigns of violence.
What is the line, Jeff, on that? Like Pam Bondi, I thought, humiliated herself with her comments about hate speech. But what's the line?
Yeah, I mean,
I thought she should resign after that.
I agree with you. Anybody should have a right to express any political and social opinion they want to, no matter how controversial it is. That's protected speech by the First Amendment. And everybody should have a right to burn a flag symbolically, as long as it's not somebody else's flag. They have a right to buy their own flag and burn the flag as a symbolic act of protest. So nobody should be, even the most loathsome, toxic, obnoxious opinions, speech should be protected. That's what free speech means. If you start banning everything that somebody's offended by,
But what is the line?
The line is direct incitement of violence, and that's
Yeah.
always been the line. Direct incitement of violence is not protected speech by the First Amendment. So if you're basically saying, go out and kill somebody, I
Like
urge you
this
all to go out.
guy, Hassan Piker, who was just in
Oh
the New
God,
York
that guy.
Times, who said, go kill all of let the
Yeah,
streets run red with conservative blood and kill
yeah. I
these
mean,
people. Like,
that is absolutely incitement to violence. And you'll find if you go on to like Antifa social media sites, there's a lot of explicit and direct encouragement of violence,
mm-hmm.
and that's not protected speech. I mean, actually, here's where I'll tell you where the line is. A very fine line. I have a right to say all so and so should be killed. Pick your villain as who should be killed. I have a right to say all so and so should be killed. But if I say go out and kill a so and so, or let's go kill a so and so, that's where you cross the line into direct incitement of violence. It's pretty clear, actually.
Yeah.
And of
What
course,
did
if you're actually plotting an acts of violence, like we have these attacks on ICE facilities and attacks on federal officers, and some of these were pre-planned attacks and so forth and so on. Absolutely, those people, that's not free speech, that's action. If you're planning acts of violence, that's tangible action. That's not protected by the First Amendment.
Yeah. I want to ask you before we wrap up, Jeff, what do you think of this campaign on the right to get people fired who
I don't like
posted
it.
things celebrating Charlie's murder?
I don't support it, actually. I mean, but I think you have to parse that. I mean, it's a complicated question, and I think it deserves a little bit of a complicated answer. First of all, you have to just acknowledge the fact that a lot of people who are posting these things, these kind of nasty comments about Kirk's assassination, I mean, some of them are just trolls who are trying to provoke people. Some of them are people with dark senses of humor who are just making, sardonic jokes. Like, I mean, you could say, doesn't the band have his right? Doesn't the band have a right to call itself Dead Kennedys? For example, right? I mean,
Right.
you could make fun of, and then some of them are actually people who are just, you can see that they're actually malicious people who believe that it's perfectly um, okay to dance on somebody's grave just because you don't agree with their political opinions. Okay. The first two categories of people, I mean, there's always people that are going to make jokes out of things and going to deliberately be provocative for the sake of provoking people. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not it takes there's almost nothing that offends me except attacks on free speech. But I think if a person is like a teacher or is a professor or works for the U.S. government or a municipal government, and you are going on your social media site, now you have a right to express your opinions as a private citizen. But if you're going on a site and basically uh, uh, celebrating political assassination, first of all, you should be exposed. So I 100% approve of these websites. They're creating websites and some of these platforms
Yeah.
like Lives of TikTok that are posting all the crazy shit that these lunatics are saying. That's a good thing. They need to be exposed. Disinfectant. Publicity is the best disinfectant for cockroaches. I mean, light. so, the people who have these views, who are not being tongue in cheek and who are just not fucking around, people who seriously express malevolent hatred in this kind of a context, they should be shamed. They should be publicly shamed, absolutely publicly shamed. I don't think that there should be campaigns pressuring their employers to fire them. But I would have to say that if I was an employer and I had somebody that seemed to be really sadistically cheering on an act of political violence like that, I would really feel like maybe I should fire this person.
Mm-hmm.
Because do you really want a fanatic like that working for you? I mean, I wouldn't.
Yeah. And I mean, as you said, all of those people in professions where it's either some of them are taxpayer funded.
Absolutely.
And then critical infrastructure like doctors and nurses. This girl was telling me that her mother was in a medical procedure.
Yeah.
The doctor, she was under light anesthetic, and the doctor was working on her and started making light of the Charlie Kirk assassination. And he doesn't know that she's like she was deeply affected by it, but she's
Yeah.
at this guy's mercy who's a doctor.
Yeah, that's just utterly.
Like,
Well,
it's
here's
just
what it is.
bonkers.
Here's what it is. When you behave in ways that are totally unprofessional, that's legitimate cause for firing you. If you're a doctor and you're not willing, and you're displaying some reluctance to treat somebody because you don't like their political views, or whatever it is, that's totally unprofessional behavior. You're supposed to be, as a law enforcement officer, as an EMT person, as a doctor,
Yeah.
you're supposed to be a person who protects everyone without discriminating against people, right?
Yeah. I
And if
wouldn't
you're
go to a doctor anymore who isn't like a MAGA or conservative doctor at this point for a serious thing. If I was
yeah,
going
I
to be
mean,
at their mercy, I wouldn't do it.
well, I think it depends, because if somebody is just, I mean, I don't care what private political opinions people have,
I
but
don't either. I
if
just
you're
don't
on social
trust.
media, spewing out hatred all the time, and you're a
Yeah,
doctor,
I've
I
seen
mean,
enough
I wouldn't want to go
lunacy.
to you either. I
I've,
mean,
I've, yeah, I've seen
yeah,
enough lunacy from mainstream people
absolutely.
to
Well, that's the
feel unsafe in certain situations
that
if I
that's the
can
most
make my
shocking thing.
choice.
That's the most shocking thing. Like sort of where we began. The most shocking thing is this huge swath of people who are not extremists, who are not left wing radicals,
Yeah, airline
who are
pilots.
who are just like, I would call them brainwashed progressives, brainwashed and illiberal progressives, who are actually behaving the same way that extremists behave after one of their enemies is killed. That's
Yeah,
a very troubling thing.
it is. So,
So
Jeff, I have two more questions just to finish with.
okay.
One is
Anyway,
kind of
one last thing about the canceling, though. You were
yes,
asking.
please.
I don't think that there should be huge campaigns to cancel everybody on social media who expresses opinions you don't like. I don't care whether they're left wing opinions or right wing opinions or any other opinions. People have a right to express their opinions. Now, yeah, it's true that maliciously celebrating political murders, that that's you're skating on thin ice there, But I think you should expose the people, publicize what they do, and then let the chips fall where they may. If their employer goes, well, fuck, I don't want this crackpot, this person working for me, and fires them, I'm not going to complain about that.
Yeah. So two questions. One is ideologically, we've talked about policy stuff and ways to combat this, but ideologically, how can you reverse what's happening in America and the West, especially amongst young people? Like, is it even possible?
I have very little faith. I'm very pessimistic about this, because I really think that, especially on the left, but also on the right. I mean, you've got some totally brainwashed crackpots on the right, and not just on the extreme right. You've got these also people on the right that are pretty, Trump can do no wrong, and or that.
Sure.
Or that we should be suppressing the speech of our enemies. Not just people on the radical right, but people who are, you know, um, that's bad. And on the left, we have a huge number of people who have those kinds of attitudes, and the problem really is that they're just totally brainwashed by the legacy media. I mean, if you're just reading the New York Times and you're listening to NPR and you're watching MSNBC, I mean, you have such a distorted picture of the world, a picture that's almost an inverted picture of reality, that it's that it's no wonder you're going to end up with these crackpot ideas, and to have these horrible attitudes, and being emotionally overwrought and angry and upset about everything, and hating everybody that and all the time. It's no wonder. But you can't just blame propagandistic media for the problem. Nothing is stopping these people from having a critical perspective, from critically, when they listen to particular sources, from adopting a critical perspective on what they're hearing or what they're reading.
Why is that missing?
I mean, I think it's a fairly rare thing in general. I think that most people do not really have a critical perspective on sources. I mean, I'm a historian, so one of the things that historians learn is source evaluation. That's the main skill you learn. It's the main skill you have to master if you're a historian. And so there's never a time when I'm reading a source about anything that I'm not evaluating the biases of it, that I'm not being critical of certain, even sources that I agree with about a lot of things, I'm constantly criticizing them for things I don't agree with them about, you know. So the idea of just like gullibly accepting everything that I read, I mean, it's just appalling to me that so many people all across the political spectrum are so willing to gullibly believe whatever sources they read, to uncritically accept whatever information they're getting from biased sources. I mean, that's just a fundamental problem. And I don't know. And maybe part of it's just a human problem, because people tend to want to have their own prejudices and biases and values and beliefs reinforced. So most people tend to read sources that reinforce their pre-existing opinions, rather than listening to sources or reading sources all across the spectrum. You know, me, I listen to podcasts all across the political spectrum. I read sources all from the radical left to the radical right. I mean, I'm interested in what all kinds of people are saying. But most people, they just want to be in a bubble. They want to be in a bubble where they don't have to suffer any cognitive dissonance. You know, that they can just be in this comforting bubble where everybody shares their basic values and their opinions, and they can constantly get their own views reinforced and get affirmation when they post things with all these other people who like them and all this kind of stuff and cheer them on.
And that's also true of like real conspiracy theorists and flat earthers, like this,
Of course.
like this affirmation bubble,
Absolutely.
and an inability to process complexity,
Absolutely.
grayness.
Yes. I mean, conspiracy
it's like a
theorists,
safety, like a narcissistic safety. I think in it.
Oh, absolutely. It's narcissism. It's virtue signaling, and it's protecting yourself from feeling anxious. Because if you really had to evaluate information from a wide variety of sources that would undermine your own beliefs, or that would challenge your own beliefs, it's something that a lot of people find uncomfortable.
It is a nightmare.
It really is a nightmare. For me, I like it. I mean, to me, that's the fun thing, is when you're having debates with people and you disagree with people. That's how you learn something.
Yeah. I thought that was just like the normal, that I guess I make the mistake of just presuming that everybody operates that way.
Yeah, no, in fact, I think
you're just like suspicious. I'm suspicious. That's my default position, is suspicion.
Me too.
And contempt.
Yeah, me too. My default position is suspect everything, or suspect, not suspect, but to be, I don't know, I want to have, if somebody makes a claim, I want to see the evidence for it. That's what I'm saying. I'm not going to accept factual statements without seeing evidence for it. So I want to see somebody provide evidence for any statement that they're making. And if they're not providing reliable evidence, then I'm not going to accept it. Or if people are making statements that are logically incoherent or logically inconsistent, you can say, well, your conclusion does not follow from your premise there. You know, that's a logical fallacy you've just made, right? So I think it's a psychological thing. You know, I was born just to be kind of a contrarian. I've always just been I've always been a rebellious person. You know, I don't want to establish the accepted views on things. I don't want to accept what authorities say. You know, that's always kind of been my default position. You know, is to go against the grain, is to go, you know, and so I always go against the grain. Like I say, even when I'm listening to commentators who I generally agree with, if they say things I don't agree with, right away I'm going, well, no. you know. But it's so many people, they just believe all the bullshit like the New York Times peddles, even though they've been caught lying so many times, and you know, they've made factually incorrect statements a million times. People still believe them, trust them as a reliable source. I just don't understand, you know, and they don't even seem to understand how much the mainstream media has changed. I mean, it used to at least pretend to be fair. It used to pretend to be balanced, even though it had a liberal bias. Yeah. Now it doesn't even pretend. Now it's just a progressive bias, not even a liberal bias. It's an illiberal progressive bias. You know, a globalist illiberal progressive bias. That's what the legacy media.
And now on the other side, at least for me, I find myself, I read a lot of people on Twitter, and I'm like, okay, there are no guardrails here either. If someone is completely wrong, or corrupted, there are no consequences. There are no editorial standards either on
But you
Twitter,
don't.
so I don't expect them
No,
either.
you don't. And
But
that's
you
the good
do
thing about
over time, just like reading a newspaper, you would maybe develop trust over time
correct.
from
Well,
people you
that's
read,
right.
but there are no standards and there are no consequences. And
Yeah, and
one of
I actually think that's kind of a good thing. I mean, I think it's a good thing that social media is a free forum for all the crazies and the
right, you
crackpots.
just have to be able to navigate it and sift through
Exactly.
it and parse through all of this stuff.
Bingo. That's
Not
right.
maybe not everybody should be a free thinker.
Not everybody is a free thinker. That's the
Um,
problem. Most people are not free thinkers, and expecting that they are going to be free thinkers is a mistake.
yes. I'm learning that. I had two more questions for you, Jeff.
Go ahead.
One is maybe since we're on the subject, there's been a lot of chatter about like Israel being involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and that's being pushed by Candace Owens and Tucker. Not, I shouldn't say pushed, but I think has been suggested as a possibility.
I think it's a bunch of crap.
Um,
I think that's just a crackpot conspiracy theory. Um, there's no evidence that the Israelis would have any strong motivation to want to silence Charlie Kirk.
I think it would be against their interest, even because he
Absolutely would
was
be
one of the
against.
only defenders of Israel left on the
Absolutely.
right. It wouldn't even benefit Israel for
It would
them to
not.
do that,
It would
even if
not
it were
benefit.
true.
No, it would
Um,
not benefit them, and it would make literally no sense at all. So to me, there's no who would benefit from it. It certainly wouldn't be Israel benefiting from
yeah.
it.
But do you see like are you experiencing an outsized focus on Israel's influence in America on the right?
Yeah, because well, not so much on the right. I mean, look, we all know that there's certain people on the right I mean, anti-Semitism on the right has been a thing forever. I mean,
But why
nothing new.
now, and why like I think we're under the influence of a Qatar, possibly like a Qatari and Turkish influence operation to some
Okay, well,
degree.
that's
They're
a whole
obviously
different. That's
spending
a
a
different.
shitload of money.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a different issue, and we can get to that in a minute. But I think what we basically have is in the radical right has always been primarily anti-Semitic. There are some people there are some elements within the radical right or the revolutionary right that like Israel, that approve of Israel uh, uh, defeating the Arabs and so forth and so on. But anti-Semitism is baked into the radical and revolutionary right. I mean, there's obviously some factions that aren't, but I mean, you see that all the time. I mean, when you go on to even the most intellectual white nationalist sites, for example, there's constantly talking about the Jewish question and all this kind of. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's I mean, it's just an obsession with these people. And of course, there's people on the left, anti-Zionism. They call themselves
of
anti-Zionists.
course, yeah,
They're basically Jew-hating anti-Semites. I mean, it's not just. It's one thing to legitimately criticize Israel for certain things that they deserve to be criticized for. It's another thing to demonize and denounce the Israeli state and to denounce Zionism as a project and to pretend like the Arabs, including the Islamists, are innocent lambs. All this kind of. I mean, that's just. And why is Israel? Why are people more obsessed with the behavior of Israel than all these horrendously authoritarian regimes throughout the world? All the Arab regimes that are anti-democratic and have killed thousands of their own people, tens of thousands of their own people, or that have waged campaigns like in Sudan against the animists and I mean, why aren't these people who claim to be so concerned about violations of human rights? Why are they focused almost entirely on Israel and ignoring all these other countries that are vastly greater human rights abusers? I mean, you can't tell me that it's not because they're not obsessed with Jews and hating Jews. I mean, to me that's just an obvious thing. Now, as far as like some people on the dissident right, I mean, there's some anti-Semitism on the dissident right, different factions, of course, there too. People well, let's just get off the thing. Candace Owens is a crackpot. There's no reason why anybody should pay attention to anything she says about any subject. Uh, or Nick Fuentes, this idiot Groyper. Of course, that's the radical right. But but when you talk about like Tucker, I mean, Tucker's kind of gone off the deep end. I mean, it's weird. Like when he was fired on Fox, at that point he was really one of the only people who was sort of promoting a populist agenda,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
everybody and pretty much everybody else on Fox was promoting like an establishment Republican agenda. And so, and then when he was fired, I mean, it was just kind of like, wow, they fired the only person who was actually saying things that were of any interest. I mean, not that I agreed with them all the time. I didn't, of course, but the point is that, but then it turned out when he got off on his own, he kind of just went off the deep end,
Why do you think that is? Just no good, lost the guardrails of
I think so.
his
I think
producers
that
and writers at
here's what I
Fox?
think happens sometimes with people who adopted dissonant perspectives or who adopt perspectives that challenge mainstream narratives. At a certain point, they become so wedded to challenging mainstream narratives that even if the mainstream narratives are correct, they don't accept them anymore. And they
Mhm.
reach a point where any kind of dissonant idea which challenges a mainstream narrative, they tend to have some kind of a sympathy for, or uh, uh, you know, and they're not able to distinguish, like you were just suggesting, between legitimate critiques of establishment narratives and crackpot critiques of establishment narratives, you know. And so if you're having uh, people who are basically Nazi apologists on, or you're having uh, uh, people who are like, peddling like this nonsense about uh, Kirk being targeted by Israel, or it's to say it's the equivalent of the crazy left wing conspiracy theories that like the shooter of Kirk was like a groiper.
Right.
Complete nonsense,
Just bullshit.
total
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah.
And despite it being total bullshit, it's not only peddled by crackpots on the left, by the usual radical idiots, but also by like progressive so-called intellectuals, like this woman Heather Cox Richardson or whatever her name is, that historian at Yale, who's just basically a progressive propagandist. But she was pushing the Groiper theory like as of yesterday. I mean, despite the fact that it's been completely demolished.
Yeah, they just want it to be
They want it to be
otherwise
true
than what
so
it
badly.
obviously is.
They want it to, yeah, they want it to be true so badly that they just refuse to accept reality, and they desperately want to protect their own side from being held responsible.
They
I
should
mean,
be
that's
nowhere near journalism,
no,
media, informing the public. Like they're in the opposite profession from what
that's
they were
correct.
shooting for.
They're in the business of
It's
of mis
it's
of
unbelievable to me. Yeah,
disinforming the public.
literally.
And I would say that's the mainstream media now. The irony was during the Biden administration, he tried to create this vast censorship industrial complex by labeling everything that challenged official narratives as disinformation. You know, the reality is that nobody peddles more disinformation. There's the difference between misinformation. Misinformation is just honest error. You're making a false claim uh,
Mhm.
because you're just it's an honest mistake. Disinformation is when you're intentionally disseminating false information.
Mhm.
Nobody is disseminating more disinformation at the present time in the United States than the mainstream media.
Agree.
That's just the reality of it. I mean, and that's why they're so desperate to support the labeling everybody who challenged their narratives as being disinformationists. you know, they're trying
Um,
to achieve like total information control by delegitimizing everybody who challenges their own disinformation narratives.
yeah, I think people care less and less I think their grip on discourse is slipping away. It's so
Yeah,
absurd.
it really is absurd.
I hope it is. Um,
Yeah, I mean, but I do think, I mean, maybe we can sort of try to end on a slightly more optimistic note.
yeah,
I
please.
mean, I was not like a huge fan of Charlie Kirk. I mean, he's a social conservative and a religious conservative with lots of views I don't agree with. I mean, to the extent that he was had some elements of populism, I supported that more. But there were a lot of his basic views were much too conservative for my taste. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of them. But I mean, the guy was, like I said, the guy was just was at least was trying to engage in civil discourse and persuade people. And I don't know how anybody can see that as threatening unless you're a person who knows that your views can't hold can't withstand a debate. And there's a lot of people on the left who I think fundamentally are insecure about, even though they profess their views so strongly and so fanatically, I think somewhere deep down they know that that they're not actually sustainable in an open debate.
It's performative.
And that's why the majority of people don't agree with the left on these issues, on crime, on border, on immigration, on homeless, on trans. I mean, those are very unpopular opinions to the majority of Americans. Those are opinions that are maybe shared by 25% of Americans or less in the case of the trans thing, really. So the left is pushing unpopular opinions, and they can't stand to have anybody challenge their opinions and expose the idiocy of their opinions. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. But getting back to Charlie Kirk, so I mean, again, I would be just as upset if it had been like a moderately leftist person who was going out there debating. Like, if somebody shot Bill Maher, I'd be really pissed off. And again, I agree with him about a lot of stuff. I don't agree with him about other stuff, but I mean, he's willing to debate, and he's willing to, he's a little too smug, but the point is he's willing to debate people, and he's willing to challenge this craziness on the left as well as the stuff on the right that he doesn't like. So, I mean, it would really upset me if somebody like Bill Maher was assassinated by some right-wing nut,
Yeah.
And I just can't understand the people who are like jumping for joy, metaphorically or even literally, about the assassination of somebody like Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I think it's a spiritual sickness. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
some sort of detachment from humanity and some kind of dehumanizing.
it is a product of dehumanization of people, which is widespread now. And I don't know if I hesitate to use spiritual because I don't have a
I
spiritual.
bet.
I don't have a spiritual bone in my body, but I do think that there's a profound moral there's a profound moral void in any person who jumps for joy at the assassination of somebody who expresses views they don't like. Now, it's one thing if you're talking about somebody who's expressing, if somebody's saying, I want to exterminate all of you people, then you could imagine that somebody in the group that this person wants to exterminate might be okay if the person was killed, whether it's a class enemy or a race enemy or a religious enemy. Or
well, these people would just lie and say that,
yes,
so and so said that he wanted to exterminate all.
Yeah, which of course is ridiculous.
Whatever.
This whole trans narrative about the trans genocide. There is no trans genocide.
Yeah.
In fact, transsexuals, not transvestites, transsexuals commit vastly disproportionate amounts of violence themselves.
Against other transsexuals.
No, against people, against normal people who they regard as enemies. And sometimes against other transsexuals, like the Zizian cult, that crazy Zizian trans cult.
And we didn't get to the Zizians.
No, we didn't.
We'll have to leave the Zizians for the next time.
But the point is that there's a lot of these trans people are carried out. Given the size of the transsexual population, they carry out disproportionate amounts of violence themselves. That's just a fact now. There's been a wave. I would say 25 murders at least in the last year and a half been carried out by trans people. Whether they're some of them are mentally disturbed and just shoot up anybody nearby, but some of them are politically targeted.
Yeah.
But some of the times they kill their own parents or something like that. But this is just, as far as I'm concerned, that's just more evidence that these people are mentally unbalanced.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand the whole idiocy of so much of the left side of the political spectrum trying to normalize that kind of deviance and psychopathy. I mean,
So, Jeff, what was the positive note that we were going to end on?
Oh, the positive. Yeah, sorry, we got off on a more negative. The positive note is that I think that Kirk's assassination, maybe, some people could say it's like a Rubicon. They crossed the Rubicon here. I'm not so sure if I would say that that's going to be true in the long term. But in the short term, I think the reaction of so many people, not just the radical leftists, but the reaction of so many people who claim to be tolerant progressives about this malicious celebration of this murder, I think it's kind of eye opened the eyes of a lot of people in the center. Um, it doesn't shock me because I know these people have had those attitudes all along. But for a lot of people who just kind of accept some of the self designations of people on the left about how tolerant they are and humanitarian they are, I think it's profoundly shocking to see people uh, behave in the way they've behaved in the wake of some of these people have behaved in the wake of the
Yeah.
Kirk assassination. So I think a lot of these people in the middle of the who are moderates, including people who are independents. I mean, I'm an independent myself as far as a voter. I think a lot of these people, seeing the way the left has behaved and seeing how the media has tried to frame this and lie about the Kirk assassination, I mean, I think that's opened the eyes of at least a significant number of people who are going, these people really have gone too far. They've really gone
I
too
hope
far.
so. I
I hope
hope
so
so.
too. I mean, I'm not inclined to be optimistic. I'm always a pessimist and a cynic, but in this case, I do feel like they've they've scored a self goal,
An own goal. Yeah.
an own goal, and that now whether it lasts all the way to the midterm elections, I don't know. But um, the other thing is there's going to be more cases like this. Just today, somebody was arrested with a long rifle somewhere in the South, trying to looked like he was trying to assassinate some Republican politician or something.
Oh my God.
Just today,
I haven't seen it.
yeah, just today there was something about that. They still haven't identified who he is or what his motives are. But and look, the other thing I think we can see, uh, there's been a transition. Some wag wrote, there's been a transition from the what do you call it left, the cancel left to the Luigi left, the Luigi Mangione left. You know,
Yeah.
and I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, did you see that all those idiots outside Mangione's courtroom?
They're
I mean,
just
people have,
meant to me. They're like mentally ill,
they
like
are mentally
very
ill.
sick people.
They're like mentally ill people or just fanatics or ideological
And
fanatics.
all women, all
Yeah,
these
a lot of them are women. A lot of them are
like the
women.
type of women that want to marry like a serial killer who's doing life
Exactly.
in prison,
Yeah, that's right.
like that kind of woman.
Yes, that's exactly right. But the worst thing of all is like all these progressive boomers, man, especially the women, man. Holy shit.
Oh my
I
God.
mean, they are just so insane. And there's like these unhappy women, many of them who didn't have children,
Yes.
who were feminists, who
Yes.
were part of the 60s. And I mean, these are the people who are the most emotionally unhinged people, I think. I mean,
I
they're not
agree.
people who are dangerous in the sense that they're going to go out and shoot somebody, but they're just emotionally unhinged people. And they just vote for lunatics who are
Yeah. And
doing
they think they're going
tremendous.
to get like a do-over at life or something.
Yeah, like they're gonna,
It's,
or they're like trying to recapture the glory days of the '60s. Even though they've become the establishment, they are the establishment. I mean, that's
yes.
the thing which is so pathetic about these progressives is they like to think of themselves as fighting the man. They're like fighting the system, but
Well,
they are the system. They are the establishment.
there
Progressivism
are,
is the establishment.
well, some people think that this is what we're experiencing now is like a imbalance of toxic feminine energy, not only
Absolutely
from those women, but also from men who have been
neutered,
browbeaten by their
neutered.
partners or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
And no one has just said no
exactly.
to any of this. And this is what we're witnessing now. So it's
Yeah,
the men that are actually responsible for this.
yeah, yeah. A lot of them are all the so-called male feminists, quote unquote.
Yeah,
These
the white dudes for
Yeah,
Kamala and these
the white
like
dudes
just
for Kamala,
ridiculous, like
like tough guys like Tim Waltz, beta males, like these total beta males that act tough, it's just like
Tim
so.
Waltz and his what was his thing, carrying weapons of war.
Yeah, I mean,
And he was like in Italy
yeah,
in
exactly,
like an
man.
administrative post. And the
Yeah,
picture
exactly.
of him, like the hunting picture, he like doesn't know
Yeah,
how to hold a rifle. He's just like
I
a
know. It's
fucking clown.
so pathetic, man.
Yeah.
But just like the parents who have these trans people who accept this lunacy. instead of trying to draw a line. The role
Yeah,
of
there's
parents
no
is
like,
role of parents is to keep their children from going off the deep end.
yeah,
And
protect them.
too many parents are actually enabling their children to and pushing them in these crackpot directions. It's
Well,
just
it's like there's a negative, there's status wrapped up in it. So having a trans kid in these liberal hierarchies is like the ultimate.
yeah.
When it should be the opposite. They should
It
be
should
like,
be the opposite.
they should
You
have
should.
boundaries, and they should be protecting their kid, and they
That's
should
right. They
accept
should be protecting their children.
like male and female biology,
Yeah, exactly.
and saying no to kids.
Precisely.
But here we are.
This is like the Lysenkoism of our time. The trans thing is the spear point of modern Lysenkoism. You know. So,
What does that mean?
well, Lysenko was a Soviet agronomist who, who's had crackpot theories about how to grow crops, but they were more compatible with Marxist doctrine, and so he promoted his crack. He was basically abandoned Mendelian genetics and was promoting like these crackpot theories of how to grow crops, and the result was widespread famine and millions of people died. You know, so that's what happens when
And now we have
when
kids,
ideologues ideologues deny reality. It has catastrophically negative
and we're
real world effects.
experiencing them now in the form of, you know, trans people shooting up schools, and
Exactly.
everyone's unhappy.
Everyone's unhappy.
So
So,
great, Jeff. Thank you
well,
so
I guess we
much.
didn't end on a happy note after all. I was I was trying to
Well,
end on a more positive note, but apparently it didn't work. So
um,
anyway, yeah. So it was great though. It was a great conversation.